Hi, this is Rich Girard, host of Girard at Large in the Morning, every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on AM 1250 WGAM. Welcome to this YouTube video that we were able to put together thanks to our partnership with Bill Wynn at GoffstownToday.com. We hope you enjoy what you're about to see. Joining us now is Dave Gelinas. He's not only the school committeeman from Ward 7, he is the vice chairman of the Manchester School Board, and he accepted our invitation to come on the show and talk student violence. And David, like so many other of our elected officials, is a working man. So it took a while for us to get him in the schedule so that he had a day off where he could come in. And Mr. Vice Chairman, we thank you for joining us here this morning on Girard at Large.
Anytime, Rich.
All right.
I didn't bring a student with me. I couldn't find one on the way out.
They're all studying very hard.
That's right.
They know we're spending a lot of money on
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. Obviously, we want to focus on the student violence question, but the mayor did release his budget last night, and so we might as well get this topic under our belt.
Sure.
He essentially level funded the school board and the school board's budget, and in doing so, brought to the attention of the public other funds that the schools do have to spend, noting that total expenditures in the Manchester school system under this budget would be roughly $182 million, or a per pupil cost of over $11,800. Is this a fair budget coming from the mayor, Mr. Vice Chairman, or are we going to see the school board kind of go to the mat and try to get an increase in funding?
I guess it depends on who's listening as to what's fair or not. The mayor did what he had to do. The mayor presented a budget based on the tax cap, which he did. I think it's also interesting to note that as the chairman of the board, he also voted for the 152 that we've sent to the board of mayor and aldermen. And that's not a criticism. That's just the system of how the tax cap works. I thought it was a very shrewd presentation that he made. I thought it was interesting that he spoke against the fact that he was opposed to the 3-year averaging of the consumer price index, which is used for the averaging that has to be used in the tax cap, and very politely and very smoothly criticized the alderman who had supported it, and also that the Bill Standers, the finance officer, had suggested that the alderman not do that, but then in the very next sentence said that he would not support any move to go over the tax cap. So it was an interesting presentation in that part. But the mayor did what he was supposed to do. Now it's the onus is on the board of mayor and aldermen as to what they're going to do. We're now gone through the second phase of a 4-part budget process. The school board has done their part. The mayor has done his part. The aldermen have to do their part, and then when the aldermen give us our final appropriation, we have to take our final votes as to where the money's going to go.
Now, one of the votes that the school board recently took was to authorize the superintendent of schools to send potential layoff notices to a number 161 full-time FTEs, full-time equivalent
Full-time employees.
And that was based on the number being $152 million, and if the $150 million budget, which is what the mayor recommended last night, were to come to fore, the superintendent said he probably need to lay off 211 employees. So I have 2 votes for you, Mr. Vice Chairman, knowing that you were opposed to that motion, the RIF vote. Will the superintendent now come forward and seek authority to increase the number of people he might need to lay off from 161 to 211, another 50 employees? Will he seek that authorization from the board at this time? And do you believe, now that the board has acted as it has and the mayor has proposed the budget he's proposed, that the Manchester Education Association might be a little more focused on the concessions that need to be made in order to bring them in line with the city unions? The mayor made a point of that last night, saying there were $5 million that could be saved if those unions came to heel and accepted the same program that the city unions, the police, the fire, the other unions have settled at. Do you expect them to come to the table now with those concessions and move forward in the best interest of their membership in the district?
Well, there's 2 questions there, so let's start with the first
Only
one.
2? I was shooting for 3.
Well, I heard 2. The first one is, what will the superintendent do? I can't predict what the superintendent's going to do. He could do a variety of things. Ask for another 50 people to be laid off. He could suggest that we wait and see what we have for any surplus in the current budget, if we have any. Or he may suggest additional savings elsewhere. I'm not sure where that could be. We pretty much have gone through that budget. Or we could use half of the expendable trust, which is a savings account, so to speak, and use 2.5 million, and we wouldn't have to do the 50 additional people.
That would wipe out the expendable trust.
No, it would still keep half, and it would keep it at a level that we have not gone past. We've used expendable trust in the past for some other areas, which they're an emergency savings account.
For our listeners, explain what the expendable trust
The
is.
expendable trusts are revenue overages in line items of the budget. We have, I think it's six or seven of them, the biggest one being in the health insurance line. And if there is a surplus in that line item at the end of the budget year, that surplus goes into what we call an expendable trust, and it can be used for emergencies in the following budget or budgets thereafter if we never tend to use them. We have used them in the past. For emergency, we've also used them in the past to balance our budget. So there's a variety of options that the superintendent may suggest to us. He could suggest them to us this coming Monday, because we're having a meeting on what he's going to present to us under the current numbers.
Now, the school board, if I'm not mistaken though, has already taken a vote this year not to use expendable trust fund dollars for this budget.
It took that vote and failed by one. There were some board members that were absent, but any budget item that we either vote for or vote against can come up again in June or May, depending upon when the aldermen give us the final number. And I would hope that this year, the aldermen, that's my plea today, I'm hoping that the aldermen will do what they have done in the past. They haven't done it every budget year, but they have done it in the past. And that is send the budget to us before they've actually completed the city side's budget. I think they have a pretty good idea what they want to do. The sooner we have that number, the sooner the school board can act, the sooner the administration can do what they have to do. And the sooner we'll know if we're going to have to try to find another 2.5 million or have to let 50 more people go, or if we're going to actually get more than what we sent.
Okay, and then the second question.
The second question is, who knows what the teachers are going to do? As I've said before in this program, I'm a very strong supporter of our unions. I grew up in a union family, so I understand it. I know there's people who don't believe in unions, and we could have a toe-to-toe discussion on that at any
Oh,
time.
hey, listen, my dad was president of the MEA, so I'm
Well,
not
okay.
hostile to the cause.
But if you may remember, I'm the one that made the motion that we have the superintendent have contract discussions with our unions. So I'm not opposed to having the conversation.
Would you encourage them at this point?
I would encourage them.
To come forward with
I would
concessions?
encourage them to sit down with the superintendent. I think maybe we might have to have the conversation of whether or not the mayor should be involved with it. I would not be opposed to that. But it still comes down to the union's membership and their leadership, whether or not they want to make any concessions.
Are you disturbed at all that the union leadership does not appear to be communicating with its membership about the concessions being sought by the administration?
Well, I'm not sure if they're not communicating with their membership. I know if I were a member and they weren't communicating with me, I would not be happy with that. But I haven't seen any evidence that they're not communicating with their membership.
Okay. All right, so David, final thought on the budget, because we're going to wrap it up on this and we're going to go to our breaks and then we're going to come back and talk violence.
Sounds like we're breaking down.
Yeah, we still got a minute.
Sure.
All right, so David, as you know, there was an incident at Memorial High, which we have called the Memorial Melee, that really prompted us to investigate in a serious way student violence issues and how they're handled here in the city of Manchester. By the way, we'll take your calls at 647-1250. And what we found is that not only is this an issue and how things are being dealt with in Manchester, but it's also an issue in other school districts. And we've had any amount of evidence come to us from parents, teachers, not only within the district but outside. So I think we have something that's broadly systemic. So I want to say I don't believe this is an indictment of the Manchester school system and how it handles things, although I do think things could be handled differently. So let me give you the opportunity to say what you think the district does right in handling issues of student violence and what you think the district could do differently and better.
Well, we do a lot of things right, and I'm very supportive of our superintendent because I think he does an excellent job. And we have SROs in schools, those are
Police officers.
police officers, And we have a system by which we have policies and a system by which teachers and principals are supposed to be reporting these instances. I know that there are those who claim that they're not being reported, but they are. And I think we have the school board in general who is supportive of the superintendent and the administration and wants to hear this information. I think we also have an administration and a school board who wants to have as safe an environment as possible. And I'm sure that board members who have been listening to your program and have talked with the administration and Officer Legacy, Lieutenant Legacy, that we're aware of it, and that we want to do all that we can to make our school system, our school buildings, and our children and our teachers as safe as possible.
David, one of the things that I have formed a conclusion on is the transparency of the system and the flow of information from the buildings to higher levels. We had Mike de Blasi here on Monday, former chairman of the Student Conduct Committee. We had Sarah Ambrosi, a member of the Student Conduct Committee, currently the school committee person from Ward 1. And of course we've had Superintendent Brennan here. And from those conversations, what I gather is this. The only incidents that are required really to be reported by a principal to the superintendent are those in which Lieutenant Legacy at the police department keeps statistics on because the police had to get involved. And then taking a look at the number of incidents that have taken place reported to the police. Whether or not that's all of them, I suspect there are some that do go unreported. But whether or not that's all of them, we take a look at the fact that the Student Conduct Committee has not met once with over 140 incidents reported to the police. And when Mike de Blasi was here, he said that when he was chairman, if I recall correctly, he said they only met once and it was only a matter of expulsion. Here's my question. Should more information generally about disciplinary issues in the schools be reported to the superintendent on an ongoing basis so that he has a more complete picture of what's happening building by building and can hold accountable the administration there for its actions? And should that information be going to your Student Conduct Committee so that the job description they have, which Mike de Blasi shared with us on Monday, can really be fulfilled?
Well, we all should be in favor of all information. And if the superintendent is not getting that information, if there are instances in class in the school buildings that aren't being reported to him, then he should let the Board of School Committee know that it's not being reported, so we can give him all the authority, all the tools that he would need to make sure that it's being reported to him. I'm not sure that that these instances aren't being reported to him, but if they're not, they should be. Now the Board of School Committee at its last meeting, on a motion that I made, in fact, sent out for a second time a letter to our principals informing them that we want to have this information sent to the superintendent so that the instances are being reported and so that we can act on them.
Now, the first time that was done...
That was back in
September,
October of last year.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason for that was the mayor was reviewing the workers' compensation reports and found that there were some 20 teachers that had been assaulted in the month of September. And there were no reports to the administration, no reports to the police, no reports to anybody. And so we come back to the question of, are the building level administrators really reporting what they're supposed to be reporting if the school board has now twice in 5 months sent letters saying, cough up the info?
Well, if they're not, I'm encouraging them to do so. And I know the mayor and I are in agreement on this, that if there is personnel who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing in regards to policy in reporting these instances, then the superintendent has our support in doing the write-up on their file. The first thing is they're given a warning. The second offense is that there's a write-up in their file, and the third offense is this disciplinary action, which could be letting a principal or a teacher go for not following policy. It's not just on that instance of violence. It can be on anything that there is policy on that they're not adhering to. So we have encouraged the superintendent to watch over this, to be mindful of it, and to do the action that he needs to do to make sure that he is getting the information that he's supposed to.
Now, should it be that the superintendent only has to refer matters involving expulsion to the student conduct committee? Or should the superintendent be required to provide additional information, at least on these incidents that go to the police department, to the conduct committee on a regular basis, so that the policymakers, the people who are elected by and accountable to the people, have a better understanding of what's happening in the schools so that they can appropriately tailor their policies and hold accountable the administration at all levels, the superintendent's level and the building level, for their response, their performance, their adherence to the policies of the school board?
Well, we all should have information, but we also don't want to have to micromanage the superintendent. We should allow him to at least do his job.
And let me
The
cut you off.
student conduct committee, though, is for expulsions. It's not for suspensions. It's not for infractions of policy. It's for expulsions. If the Board of School Committee, in its wisdom, feels that the student conduct committee should have more information, should have a broader authority in regards to these kind of actions, then the board can rewrite or redraw the boundaries or the responsibilities of the student conduct committee.
All right, I'm hearing the music, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a break right now, and I'm going to tell you about Granite State Tire and Battery. They're located at 945 Hanover Street on the fashionable Upper East Side of the insignificant city of Manchester. And they are running they're having a promo through the end of this month. They are going to be giving you a $25 gift card for the purchase of 2 tires. Now, that gift card can be used towards any future service or product purchase by that or at Granite State Tire and Battery. We also, if you buy 4 tires, can have a $50 gift card for a future service at Granite State Tire and Battery. You must know Granite State Tire and Battery, do you?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so you know they're a good outfit. Tell them you heard about it at Girard at Large. Get your gift card for the purchase of 2 or 4 tires. Do it soon, because this deal goes away with the month of March. All right, continuing now with Vice Chairman David Gelinas. So let me come at what you just said from 2 different places. Number one, the suggestion is not that information be given to the conduct committee to determine the punishment. I don't think it's a question of micromanagement to have the superintendent of schools forward information to the conduct committee, which, as you know, is a quasi-judicial board, and anything it receives has got to be confidential. So we're going to hold that in the queue for just a minute. But how, David, do you see it as a matter of micromanaging if a report saying, we had this incident happen at these schools, and this is how they were handled, so that they can be informed as the policymakers in these matters? What would be the how is that an issue of micromanagement? How does that get in the way of the superintendent doing his job?
Well, under the current guidelines or structure of the student conduct committee, which is expulsion, if it's not a matter that would create the need for the superintendent to go before the student conduct committee and come forward with an expulsion hearing or an expulsion review, then the information that he has before him would be something that he wouldn't have to bring to the student conduct committee, because it may not be an expulsion matter.
As it exists today, you're right. But in addition to expulsion, that committee, as explained to us, he showed us the school board's own write-up. Mike de Blasio said that committee is also supposed to sit in review of of what's happening in the schools, of the policies governing the code of conduct, disciplinary matters for both not for both teachers, but for students. And so I'm wondering, how can the members of that board make recommendations to the school board on policies about everything from wearing a hat to chewing gum to, giving somebody a concussion and breaking their nose, which is what happened at Memorial? How are they supposed to really be able to do that if there's no data coming to them on what's happening in the schools?
Well, just the fact that they're not getting the data doesn't mean that the data doesn't exist.
Okay.
So if they're not getting the information, if the student conduct committee is not getting the information, then why aren't they asking for it? If what you say is true about the responsibilities of the student conduct committee, then the student conduct committee should be asking of the superintendent, why don't we have this information? I believe that they view their responsibility as expulsion matters only, and that the day-to-day activities of wearing the hat or the other matters that come up during the course of the day in some of the schools aren't being reported to them because it's not a matter of expulsion. I don't disagree with you that information should flow, but not all information should have to be given to a committee if it is the responsibility of the superintendent to take that information and act upon it. I don't think anybody has been saying that the superintendent's not doing his
Well,
job.
I'm going to give you a little pushback on that, because number one, how would we know what the superintendent is doing or not doing? How does the superintendent get held accountable for his performance if there's no data moving to the people who oversee him?
I think if there was grievous mismanagement, let's say, in regards to that policy, that we would be hearing about it from our teachers and our principals. We'd be making phone calls to me, to other board members, to the mayor, and we're not getting those kind of phone
Well,
calls.
according to the mayor, clearly he is, and I can only tell you what I've experienced on this show. You know, I've got parents sending me emails about things that are happening in the schools for the pure reason of trying to get attention on them, because they're not confident that they're going to be addressed in the schools. And even if they are, everybody runs around with all these privacy, law claims, federal this, state that, and they say, well, we can't tell you anything about it. So it's an incredibly frustrating situation.
There are a lot of instances, and it came out in our last meeting, which none of us on the board are unaware of. There are a lot of these privacy instances that happen that we cannot be reported on, and a lot of these instances are being perpetrated by the same person, same student, more than once.
Well, and here's the problem with that, David. The superintendent has sat exactly where you are and said, well, we're not sure how many of them are done by the same perpetrator because we don't keep the data. We don't know how many of them involve special ed kids because we don't keep the data. But they'll turn around, as he did the other night, and say, he will not, and this floored me as a former elected official, to have someone who would have been subordinate to me as an elected official tell me, I will not provide you that information. To me was a big bright red line under what I think is a lack of accountability in the system. It was a defiant statement.
He said that to you, or he said that to the board?
He said that to the board. I about fell out of my chair.
I don't recall that statement.
Well, I would encourage you to go back and take a look at that discussion.
Because I, as the vice chair, and I've had a very close working relationship with the superintendent.
I have a great deal of respect for Tom Brennan, and
that doesn't sound like Tom to me.
Well, you were having the discussion about the flow of information, and he didn't say, I can't send it to you because of the law, but he said, I will not provide you information on regarding whether or not they're multiple offenders, the student's identity. He flat out refused to do it. And so here's the question. Everyone says, well, we don't know how many this, we don't know how many that. My question is why not? If you have, and he's made the statement before, there are probably 20 kids in each of the schools that are responsible for 85% of the problem. Fine. Why should those 20 kids not be known by the policymakers? I mean, the Student Conduct Committee is a quasi-judicial board. It, by law, has got to take anything that it gets in information, and it's got to keep it confidential. There's no black and white there. There's no black and white there. So why isn't Charlie Bass, who's a congressman, as you know, I asked him about this because what do we hear? Well, we hear a lot of it has to deal with special ed, and there are federal laws, and these kids are untouchable. That's a problem. And Charlie Bass says, if Manchester can give me the data, I will work to change the law. It's coming up for reauthorization. You tell that to the superintendent or Sarah Ambrosi, or, I was talking to another school board member last night. They said, oh, well, we don't know, we can't know because of the federal laws. That's not right. Why does not the superintendent have a dossier, right? At Bakersville School, we've got, Johnny Smith and Susie Jones and Mikey Leonard, boom. They're responsible for this, and this. Why does nobody know? And then you have a superintendent who says, I will not tell you. I think, frankly, that and I'll give you the last word, you know, feedback on this. I think frankly that everything from a cut slip to a cut kid as a disciplinary matter, he said they have a system in the schools, but that he would have to go back to the schools and get the data. My father remembers a system being put into place before he retired, which Norm Tangway squashed. Now they've got this thing called Aspen that supposedly keeps track of this stuff. He told me he'd send me that, it would take him a few days. That was more than a month ago. I'm a member of the media, publicly committed to sending me the information. Why isn't this information going with the names of the kids who commit the offenses from the buildings to the superintendent and from the superintendent to the student conduct committee, so that every level knows what's happening everywhere else for review purposes so they can be held accountable? And then why isn't a sanitized report, not with the names of the offenders or anything else like that, but one that categorizes all of the offenses that are happening in the schools? Why is that not being published on the school board's website so everybody can see what's happening in the buildings and everybody can participate in watch, you know, in holding everyone accountable?
Are you asking that these instances be reported on the websites and the student's name of who's committed the...
No. You can't categorize. You can't report the student's name. I understand that.
So what is it that you're looking for?
I'm looking to know, first of all, I think the student conduct committee should get all of that information in detail on every kid in every building who commits an offense, especially when it's got to be reported to the police.
I'm for that.
Well, that's a great step in the right direction. The other thing is once those reports have been dealt with, why not say, you know, we had like the police report we get now that doesn't tell us who the perpetrator is, but why aren't we taking a look at the number of disciplinary infractions? You know, at Memorial there were 132 kids who cut class this week. At Central there were 152 kids that got caught throwing food in the cafeteria. Whatever it is, why isn't that going out to the public so that the public can see what's happening in the buildings?
Well, I don't know if the number's that high.
Well, I'm just throwing numbers out there.
Why it's not on the website? I'm not sure if we have a policy that requires it to be on the website.
Well, should you?
I'm not sure if we need to know how many people threw food in the classroom or in the cafeteria. I think we need to know the serious offenses. You know, the building administrators, the principals and the assistant principals have the responsibility of enforcing the rules in their class. If they're not enforcing them, the superintendent needs to know, and the superintendent will let the Board of School Committee know.
And we can only hope, as Mike de Blasio said, we take a lot of this on faith because we have no way of verifying.
That's correct.
All right, School Committeeman David Gelinas, thank you very much for joining us here this
It's all
morning.
over?
It's already
My
done.
goodness, I should have come in earlier.
You are always welcome here.